On today's episode of Refashioned, we're going to be talking about the latest development in the AI saga drama that's currently sweeping fashion as brands continue to push AI on consumers and consumers continue to hate it. A very popular brand pushing what I think is just tradwife content continuously on TikTok, and I need to talk about it with you. The update to the Chinese supplier counterfeiting issue that a lot of people have been asking for, fashion's weird new race to space, and the obsession with glamorizing space that we definitely need to discuss. And a lot more, including a big update on the tariff situation and how Shein and Temu in particular have responded to it, because I think that's a really interesting case study. But literally, I think we have tons of interesting topics to get through this week. So get comfy, get some snacks, get into sweats like me, and let's get into it. Before we do, I need to address, yes, we're going to be talking about fashion. Yes, we're going to be critiquing fashion. And yes, I'm going to be doing that while sitting in a hoodie and sweatpants. And no, you can't say anything about it because I am filming this the day after coming back from a 3-day hiking trip. And this is the price you pay if you want content. So I don't want to hear it. But seriously, this is a podcast. So most people should be listening. If you're not and you're confused, you're watching this on YouTube, then this is technically an episode for my podcast Refashioned, where we talk about a lot of different topics and try to cram in a lot of online discourse into one episode. And maybe the topics are just little things I've been sent by my community that we need to quickly discuss, or just topics I don't have a full video's worth of ideas for. So it ends up being very loosey-goosey is the word I like to use. So if that sounds interesting to you, then make sure you're following me on all major podcast platforms. Or if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to keep watching it on YouTube, then just subscribe to the channel and let's get into it. Firstly, we need to talk about this TikTok I got sent because it is the worst case scenario I kind of predicted when it comes to fashion's increased use of deceptive marketing and AI. The rise of AI in fashion is something I've shared a lot of my thoughts about, especially here on the podcast. And I've often worried about the repercussions of brands creating AI marketing campaigns and replacing models with their AI counterparts and how that's going to fall back on consumers especially. But this TikTok I got sent is exposing the impact of deceptive AI on influencers now that brands can steal their likeness for fake advertising campaigns.
People started sending me this podcast interview of me sitting down talking about skincare and my skin concerns and raving about this one specific product that I was using. It's not me. The entire podcast interview of me promoting this product was digitally manipulated by this company's scanned official using AI.
I actually can't imagine how upset I'd be if I was in this influencer's shoes, or how angry I would be if they came back to me in the same way they did to her when she asked them to stop using her likeness.
So I sent them a message before I had my attorney send a cease and desist, and they responded they wanted to apologize. It was never their intention to use my image or voice without authorization. They also said that they were not aware that it was a recognized person or with image rights.
The immediate backtracking of the brand and the immediate rollout of phony excuses of we didn't realize this was a real person we were using is just utter crap. And it just rubs me up entirely the wrong way. Because not only does the creator prove that they're lying about this, that they've taken B-roll footage of her from her actual videos and overlaid it onto this ad, so they know who she is and they know what her platforms are. But is the excuse they're going with really that they thought it will be okay to go ahead with this advert if it actually was a fake person rather than a real one, and that it was therefore okay for them to be using a fake AI person to trick consumers into thinking that this is actually a real person with real skin issues that have then potentially been solved by their product, when it's actually just entirely made up and entirely deceptive? How is that the argument you're going to go with? It's actually insane. And you have to think not only does this really impact the consumers who are buying this product in good faith, thinking that it's actually helped someone with their issues and it could help them with theirs, but also it massively impacts the influencer and the audience they've built and the trust they've continuously tried to build with the people following them, that could then just be shattered by a brand using their likeness deceptively to promote a phony product. Every time I've kind of covered the topic of AI in fashion, I've had had 1 or 2 comments saying like, it's the future, we need to just embrace it, we need to find a way to use it, or it's happening, just get on the bandwagon. And I just don't really like the idea of this, like the idea that something is being pushed so hard by brands that we as consumers need to just accept it. But I did want to ask you guys whether you can see an ethical use of AI for the future of fashion and beauty. I feel like I'm always negative about the topic, but I feel like it's because no one's ever given me a great usage case for AI that solves a problem that we can't already solve with humans, especially in the creative spaces of fashion and beauty. I'm not really talking about like logistics and stuff because like, yeah, I'm sure a computer can automate better than a human, but creatively, why would we use AI when humans exist? I've never seen a good argument. So I'd love to hear your guys' arguments if this is your side of the fence, or also why you believe that it's just never going to be ethical in that case. I'd love to hear your thoughts because it's a potential video that I'm going to do in the future. But anyway, on to this next topic that I just really randomly stumbled across. I was basically researching for another video and I just put into TikTok HouseOfCB because, as I said, another video topic, and I thought they would be a good example for this. But I just got completely sidetracked by the kind of content they've been pushing lately. It's like not even trying to be subtle with how tradwifey it is. All of their videos seem to just be shoving the glamorized version of mundane house chores down our throats while people are wearing like corset dresses. And I just don't think they're even trying to hide it. They've been tagging their videos I've been seeing with like cottagecore or like coquette, but it's not that, in my opinion. It's just like housewife core, but not even good, competent housewife core where people are actually able to do these tasks. Like this comment that someone left on one of their videos made me really laugh. It was like, ma'am, your wet laundry is touching the ground. Do you know what you're doing? What are they doing? They're just showing the romanticized version of what TikTok believes is a housewife. I don't understand how this is meant to sell dresses. But having scrolled through their Instagram and their new like collection and campaign specifically, it does feel like HouseOfCB is fitting into a lot of the things I've talked about on the channel recently, like the rise of conservative indicators in fashion, food being sold by fashion as a luxury, but specifically also jumping on that trend of the rustic food and them selling it to us to try to invoke feelings of, I think, like simplicity and comfort and indulgence just by like having some bread and butter at home. I also think they've been jumping on the hobbies discourse and trying to use like the interest in hobbies as a fashion accessory to sell their clothes with. And I also think they're doing something that I haven't really talked about on the channel yet, but I'm potentially saving as a deep dive video because I've been seeing it a lot and I want to encourage you guys to leave your thoughts on this in case I do this video. But it's like the commercialization of nostalgia and girlhood being turned into like a marketing tactic by brands. Some of the HouseOfCB content, for example, feels like we're being sold the like childhood game of dressing up or playing with friends and matching with our besties and like recapturing our youth in a dress, if that makes sense. And these are all things that I've been seeing being talked about online recently, these kind of TikTok trends of recapturing your girlhood. And I think the Y2K nostalgia being back is a big example of this. And I just think it's a really interesting topic that needs to be discussed further. So leave your thoughts on it. And I might do an Instagram post call out as well with more specific questions because I think this is a really interesting topic and very interesting in the way that brands are bottling that feeling up that we're all chasing and trying to sell it back to us in the form of clothing, and how I just don't think it's working. I think it's falling really flat. Because also this dress from their new collection I wanted to talk about specifically because it looks like it's cosplaying upcycled to me. And this is something I warned was going to happen on the channel when we spoke before about the rise of upcycling and the trend of upcycling gaining traction on TikTok, especially how brands would try to fake the aesthetic of this and sell it back to us as newness that's designed to look old and loved. And this HouseOfCB dress, as I mentioned, really feels like that to me. If you're listening to the podcast rather than watching it, then I'm going to do a very bad explanation. Basically, it's a typical HouseOfCB vibe dress in a floral pattern, but they've gone ahead and stuck like checkered heart-shaped pockets on the outside in a way that looks very like hand done, very like visible mending-y kind of aesthetic. And I think it's, again, again to tie into this upcycled trend. And I think it's going to be one of many examples in the future of brands buying into this aesthetic and trying to fit the vibe without actually understanding why people want to upcycle in the first place. But yeah, we should move on because we've got a lot to cover, especially the update to the Chinese manufacturing supply chain side of TikTok that has recently exploded. And I broke down on my Substack, actually, I did a whole post on it talking about how Chinese manufacturers exposing their ties to luxury fashion is actually just them trying to sell counterfeits on TikTok and also weaponize this discourse on tariffs going on, I guess. And I also mentioned in the post how some brands have been coming out against this discourse. Like Lululemon released a statement to say that the Chinese suppliers on TikTok claiming to be part of their supply chain are in fact not part of their supply chain, and these products are not actually Lululemon products for cheaper. But despite this, consumers have been continuing to lap up this content, not only by making the original videos from the Chinese suppliers go viral, but also by doing their own like call out posts asking for the suppliers for their other favorite fashion brands to come forward and like give them the lowdown on their prices. And then also sharing spreadsheets of all these suppliers they've created with everyone else so everyone can get the cheap products. It's like there's no sentiment online that this is actually fake. People are believing this, I think. And something I briefly mentioned on Substack, but I want to dig into a little bit, is how luxury's reputation has not helped this spread of misinformation at all. The fact that luxury has always been so murky about its supply chains, it doesn't want to open up about where its sources, has worked against them massively in all of this. And it continues to work against them as brands have stayed largely silent in the wake of all this chaos rather than coming out and exposing their supply chains. Weeks later, and we still haven't seen major brands coming out with press releases or just statements on their social medias denying these claims from the suppliers, other than Lululemon, despite the fact that many are presumably losing sales and worrying about the potential long-term cultural impact of this. But apparently, there have been sneaky moves being made behind the scenes. Brands aren't speaking out online, but French luxury trade groups have quietly been lobbying policymakers to take immediate action to stop, as they put it, an unprecedented widespread disinformation campaign about the origin of luxury goods. This move is in direct response to the viral content going on TikTok, which the trade groups have said are a flagrant case of promoting counterfeiting that misleads and deceives consumers, which sounds like a noble position for them to be in, talking about how this isn't fair on the consumers rather than their profits and their bottom lines. But the question is, do consumers even care? What with the economic crisis, what with TikTok making dupe culture very socially acceptable, what with the popular belief that luxury isn't worth its price tag that has been circulating online for many, many months, and now with the emerging interest and almost like pride of shunning American companies that sprung up online in the face of these tariffs, I think it's created a perfect storm of not even bothering to question these products as counterfeit or not. Because in so many people's mind, what is the difference, for one, and what is the harm of buying from these suppliers? Certainly no harm to their wallets. If you haven't read that Substack post I did on this entire situation, I definitely recommend it because I go into it a lot more on how this anti-American sentiment is ramping up on TikTok and how it is really impacting how people feel about brands and online shopping culture. But one other thing I wanted to bring up around this topic that kind of relates, kind of doesn't, is the amount of TikToks I've been seeing from people saying that Ssense has sold them a fake version of the luxury handbag they bought from the resale site. At first I was really confused about this because I thought Ssense was quite legit. Not that I've shopped there myself, but I've seen a lot of their content online. But then I saw a Business of Fashion article which explained that rather than Ssense knowingly selling counterfeit goods, it's actually an issue of more and more fake goods making their way onto luxury resale platforms because of returns fraud going on. Basically, people buying authentic luxury items from online marketplaces and then returning returning a fake version instead and keeping the real one. The reason I thought this was linked to the earlier topic was because I think it's super interesting that people can't tell the difference between their counterfeits and the luxury fashion bags that they are supposedly receiving. Obviously, a counterfeit is made to look like the real thing, so there would be a slight hesitation, but people are specifically mentioning quality issues with these bags when they receive them and can't seem to make up their mind about whether this proves that the item is a fake or it's just a symptom of luxury being bad quality. And I think it just proves that luxury has a major reputation problem that it needs to fix if it's going to fix this issue, but also the wider issue of their profits slumping. Like, imagine having consumers get a bad quality fake of your brand and them not immediately knowing whether it was a fake or not. That's a big issue. One video I saw had a creator holding up their bag and it was really thin leather, they were saying, and it was cracked on the bottom, and they still weren't 100% sure about whether it was fake or whether it was just the luxury fashion house cutting corners. And now luxury's reputation of bad quality is impacting secondhand resale sites because no one can tell the difference between a fake and a real thing because luxury cuts so many corners with their quality. And yeah, whilst resale maybe needs to get better at authenticating and putting checks in place to make sure that counterfeits can't slip past their system, the issue could easily be solved if customers felt confident enough in luxury's quality that they can see glaring issues on a bag and not still wonder if it's just luxury's doing. I don't know, I think it just shows that luxury is so cooked, and it kind of goes back to that recent video I did talking about how the entire fashion industry is repositioning and luxury is really focusing on showing their craftsmanship in an effort to prove to consumers that it is worth the price tag. Clearly they need to be stepping that up because it's not working so far. Okay, moving on. What are your thoughts about using your hair as a sustainable styling tool? Basically, someone left a comment talking about this, and my thoughts immediately went to fashion influencers Emma Chamberlain and Lainey Ozark, who both got pixie cuts recently and who both said that it was a way of using their hair as an accessory and elevating their style through their hair. And the more I think about it, the more I kind of think that we're sleeping on this idea of hair as an accessory and hair as a sustainable trend, maybe. I just think hair is something a lot of us take for granted when we're doing an outfit, like especially when I had long hair that I just wanted to like put up out the way, or I just wanted to like leave down and do nothing with it because I was really lazy. I think it not only drags my outfits down, but it's also like just a missed opportunity of adding to your outfit and elevating it and playing with details. So maybe if you're struggling with a fast fashion addiction right now and you just don't know how to keep that newness in your outfits that so many of us are used to, then maybe see your hair as the new like way of playing around without actually buying anything. Like obviously the slick back claw clip hairstyle is as much a TikTok trend as like quite luxury, but most of us own a claw clip or something like it that they could use to achieve this style. And then like the next day you can do your hair completely different. You can do like a really cute French braid. You could wear the same exact clothes but just style your hair differently, and that's a whole new outfit. I don't know, what are our thoughts? Do we think this is too simple? Do we think there are scenarios where this isn't sustainable? Like my mind kind of thought, oh, maybe you could go into overconsumption of hair accessories because you're trying to keep it new, so you're buying all these different clips and all these different hair bands and whatever. Like, I don't know, could this be overconsumption? Probably in extreme cases, but like in most cases, no. I don't know, would like to hear your thoughts. Okay, let's cover the fashion race to space, because like everyone, I saw this. I saw the all-female space flight and immediately like something felt wrong about it, and I think that was the general sentiment online. But also my mind was just thinking, like, what is it with fashion's obsession with space right now? Why are they getting so involved? Why is space being seen as like the new luxury frontier? I mean, we had Mons design, I think that's how you pronounce it, design the spacesuits for this all-female flight. You also had the On campaign with Zendaya happen recently, which was also set in space. There's just just this new obsession from fashion brands with the space theme. And I'm going to dive into this topic again in a new video coming out soon about how fashion is selling us things that aren't clothes right now. That's really diving into lifestyles. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and leave them in the comments. But the Mont spacesuits in particular were really weird to me. They look more like the ski suits we saw from fast fashion ski wear collections than spacesuits, for one thing. But Mont's is not the first luxury brand to design spacesuits. So this isn't uncharted territory, to be fair. Just a kind of weird direction that fashion is getting more involved with, and I'm struggling to understand why. And I think it's weird that these spacesuits look more like the fashion girlies idea of what you should wear to space than something that is actually a technical garment that's made to like allow humans to be in a very crazy environment. Even the fact that all the press coverage I saw about this trip was so centered on how the women were going to look going up to space. Like one of them were like, oh, you have to get glam to go into space. Why are we bothered about what women look like when they're in space? Why is fashion so excited about dressing people to go to space? It feels super weird. And Amy Odell covered this really well in her Substack post. She just summed it up in like 2 sentences. She was also talking about all the coverage and how centered on fashion and beauty it was. And she said, that's what this space flight was all about. Glam, branding, looking hot, taking videos for social media. And yeah, just generally, it was just so cringe. And I'm surprised fashion wants to get involved with this when it's such a hot topic issue that really goes against a lot of people's feelings about what we should be spending money on and what we should be prioritizing for the human race right now. It doesn't feel like a good market to be in. So I am quite surprised that fashion is doubling down on this. And I think obviously you have extremes of this. On is not designing spacesuits, they're just doing a space themed campaign. But again, it doesn't feel like good brand positioning. It doesn't feel very understanding of people's thoughts and feelings about space right now. It's obviously a hot topic issue, so it will get a lot of media coverage. So it does kind of make sense in that respect. And I know that Mont's gained a lot of media coverage, ROI on this. So obviously financially, maybe they could argue there's a point, but it just feels tone deaf as a brand. But yeah, let's do a tariff update, shall we? Let's move on. Let's do tariffs. So as you're well aware, the whole Trump tariff situation is ongoing. Shein and Temu have made their position clear on this now. They raised their prices last month and directly referenced the tariffs as the reason why. Although, as I said in my most recent video talking about fashion's restructuring, I said that I thought ultra fast fashion was going to be raising their prices soon, with or without the tariffs. It just so happens that the tariffs came along and created a perfect excuse for them to do so without having to deal with customers' irritation, being solely focused on them increasing their prices. So yeah, not surprised that they put their prices up. Also not surprised about the fallout that's happened, especially on TikTok in reaction. People have been pretty vocal about how they feel about these prices being raised for the ultra fast fashion they've come to rely on as being ultra cheap. I've seen people sharing videos showing the price difference of what they ordered in the past on Shein and then like swiping to the new product page and showing increases in prices of like 150% or even like 200%. And I've seen comments of people saying that they abandoned their basket because of this, which I think is a big win. There's also just been this general sentiment of where are we shopping from now that Shein and Temu are raising their prices for US consumers in particular, and people sort of having discussions about where they can go to for their ultra fast fashion cheap fix. Kind of puts a dampener on that previous win of people not ordering from Shein because they might just find it somewhere else like Fashion Nova. I did see quite an interesting TikTok of one person talking about these price increases on Shein that they've been seeing and saying that if Shein want to charge that much for their clothes, then it needs to be better quality, which I knew was going to happen. And I said that in a recent video, how people have been talking about this when it comes to fast fashion raising their prices and how they expect better quality for that. Ultra fast fashion is just going to have to go through this as well. And I think it's going to be really interesting how Shein and Temu might react to that, and also how it relates to something else I'm going to bring up in a minute. But yeah, I've also been seeing people saying that they've been experiencing delays on their Shein orders after tariffs have increased and all this hullabaloo has happened. So according to one creator, they no longer have the quick ship option on Shein US. And I also saw comments on videos like this from people saying that their order was actually shipped from Shein factories really quickly. They can see online that it says shipped, but now it's sitting in a warehouse in the US waiting to go through customs. And again, I think it's going to be really interesting to see if there's going to be a fallout and whether people will be willing to pay these increased prices and wait for longer for their cheap fast fashion, or whether they'll go somewhere else. And I think Shein clearly thinks that they need to re-strategize and pull away from the US market because consumers won't want to wait and pay more. I think they're hedging their bets and looking into a new strategy, because I've seen reports that Shein and Temu are heavily investing in UK and European markets and advertising there instead. And they've been sharply cutting their US digital spending and just rethinking their US strategies in general, which is going to be a bold marketing shift if this is their strategy of pulling back on the US, because the US is Shein's biggest market and it will have a massive impact, not only on American consumers and on American tech companies that now have had some of their biggest ad revenue spenders pull off and might be complaining about that to Trump and seeing what they can do there, but also I think it's going to have a big impact on UK and Europe consumers, because Shein has now set its targets on us and we're going to be seeing a lot more lobbying and a lot more advertising to get us to fill that big US shaped hole in their profits. Which I think, speaking of the advertising campaign that I mentioned earlier, that I thought would be interesting with this idea circulating on TikTok of Shein being too expensive for consumers now. Basically, I had a follower send me a campaign going on in France from Shein talking about affordable fashion being a right for consumers, something that they are entitled to. And this has been called out as a very transparent marketing move from Shein, timed suspiciously close to the French anti-fast fashion bill vote that's happening in June. And that anti-fast fashion bill is something I've covered on my channel recently because it's been the subject of a lot of lobbying from fast fashion brands, and people are worrying that it's not going to be passed anymore because of all these efforts. So this feels like another sort of move from fast fashion brands to get that bill stalled or just dissolved completely. The campaign has slogans like, "Why should fashion be a luxury?" and "Fashion is a right, not a privilege," which clearly take notes from popular online discourse from people who believe that Shein and Temu allow people to have access to trends and cheap clothing online. But the follower I mentioned sent an Instagram post from a brand about what Shein actually stands for. Like this one, which says, "Your health and that of your children is not our concern," or "The price of our t-shirt serves as an excuse to exploit children." But unfortunately, I don't think it's had as widespread effect as the original Shein campaigns. So again, I think as consumers, we have to be really mindful about what's happening in the political sphere right now and how that's going to impact how brands are marketing to us, and how much they are lobbying at us to buy their cheap products because they're suffering in their US markets. But also, I feel like all of the topics I've mentioned in this episode have had some kind of like lesson for us as consumers about what we need to be looking out for from brands, how they're trying to market to us right now, and how we need to be smarter than that. We need to see through them. So yeah, I hope it's been a good episode. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one. Let me know your thoughts on any and all of the topics that I've covered today, but especially those ones I've mentioned I might do a wider video on, because I love to include your thoughts when I'm doing those videos. It always makes my videos better and I always enjoy them more when I include your thoughts. So yeah, thank you so much for listening and or watching, and I'll speak to you really soon. Have a lovely day. Bye.